Wonderful. And then please feel free. Yes, feel free to put your questions in chat, or like at the end of the presentation, you have time to also like have conversation, and I'll be more than happy to answer your questions. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay, well, it's not on the last slide. I want to go to the first slide. Wonderful. So sorry, Martin, can you see my screen? Perfect. So yes, so this is a view from actually one of the recent shots that we got yesterday from our gallery that shows our new display that we are having exhibiting at the moment, plus the contemporary intervention or like that we have in the middle of the gallery. That's exciting for us to have this display. But what I wanted to talk to you today is that when you look at this display, so you see like we have several different artworks on display this is, for example, a selection of the objects that we are usually having on display. We have paperwork, something like this one. We have parchment, we have leather, we have metal, we have wooden artwork, glass, gold, ceramics, and like even organic materials like shell and that olefin, which is from a tusk. So we have all these items on display. And today I was hoping that we can talk about what when we set up a museum display, what are the factors that we need to consider other than their beauty and their history. There are other factors that we need to consider when we do any display. So, for example, this is not about the rotation, but in general, when we think about an exhibit, or for example, when we ask objects to come on loan to our museum, or we loan objects to our museum, so to other museum, every single artwork that is on display, based on the UNESCO convention, we have to make sure that that object came to Canada illegally, and then it has the proper paperwork that meets that 1970 UNESCO convention. And that's something that we need to like do provenance research for every single object, that make sure that these objects either came out of that country of origin before this date. For example, Canada joined us a convention in 1976. Or like have that proper paperwork after this this convention was made that says that this object was in the property of this person and came out of that country, for like a whole legal aspect of that paperwork that needs to be filled. So every object that goes on display in any museum in Canada has to have this proper paperwork. And then also, like, for example, it should meet that if you want to bring an object on display from, for example, another country, you have to make sure, or you want to lend an object to another country, you have to make sure that you also meet the current import sanctions that the Canadian government has imposed on foreign countries. And the other one, for example, is that CITES permit. For something like that, the tusk that I showed you, or like other, for example, we have a bow that has, for example, a little bit of a bone on it for every single artwork. So you have to, like, again, have that proper paperwork that meets CITES permit. If you want to lend such objects, then you have to also go work with the Canada Custom to also fill all that paperwork for every single artwork. So, but beyond these ones, there are other items that you need to, on a day-to-day basis, you have to consider in a museum setting. So those ones are mostly for exhibitions. If you want to like have an exhibition, you have to bring objects, you have to like take care of those items. Or when we're bringing the artworks here to Canada, we had to like work with those CITES and the UNESCO convention. But on a day-to-day basis, in a museum setting, for example, in our gallery, we have to look at the humidity level and then light exposure for the safety of the artworks. Because I mean, if you exceed some level of humidity and light, of course, you might damage the artwork. So at a regular museum setting that has paper like ours, the light exposure level is around maximum 50 lux for, again, for somewhere that has paper. But in order to get a sense of how much is a 50 lux, if we want to like compare, I brought some other numbers here for you. For example, compared to direct sunlight has 32,000 to 100,000 lux, or like a natural daylight, 10,000 to 25,000. and a sunset and sunrise 400 likes. So that gives us like a little bit of a comparison about like how much then it's a museum gallery. Or like if you look into the indoor setting, like supermarket and office spaces and classroom, like a regular classroom is somewhere between 250 to 750 lux. And then the lowest of all is moonlight, it's just 1 lux. But then of course that's too low, we cannot see in that light. So then you can, that's why when you visit a gallery, it's usually dim and not that much light, because again, that's for the safety of the artwork that are on display. And here's like a chart that shows how much, for example, an object that in a museum can receive the visible light and also the ultraviolet light, and for how long. This is something that the conservators and the collection manager will use to determine how long an object can stay on display. For example, these are some examples from our collection. A paper, a textile, parchment, they usually are good with the maximum 50 lux for light and around 30 for ultraviolet, and then they can stay on display around 3 to 6 months, or like even sometimes for textile to 12 months. But then the condition of the artwork also like plays a part here. Or for leather, we can increase a little bit the maximum visible light that we can have. But then again, we have that time frame that we should stick to. But when you look at ceramics, glass, metalwork, and stone, we can see that the light factor is not that important. So you can go up to 300, which is like a regular, like the room that I'm sitting now probably is around that, like or classroom setting. And then there isn't any limit for the exposure during that set of time. So that's why if you visit, for example, our collection, we have a room that calls Bellery room when we have our ceramics. And that we can have events in that room, we can do filming in that room, because there isn't actually that much of a light limitation for filming or like for the artworks that are on display in that room. So, but when we look at this chart, and then we saw that the duration limit that says 6 months, that's where the rotation idea comes from. So what does rotation mean? Well, basically means that once that 6 months pass and then artworks were displayed for that 6 months, the organic material and paper that we discussed, they have to come off display. So then they have to then rest for like between 3 to 5 months in pitch dark. So for every 3 to 6 months that they go on display, they have to rest in dark for 3 years to 5 years. And then we need to replace them with something else, with a new item. So this is, again, a shot from our gallery that shows, for example, we have like paperwork on display, textile. This is an older image. This is from 2014. So if you come now, we don't have, for example, these oil paintings on display, or this carpet has been replaced with that contemporary work that I told you. But overall, this is a rough number from our collection. We have approximately 2,000 objects in our collection, but at any given time when you visit us, around only 250 are on display, and the rest are stored. So, and from this 250, 60 of them are works on paper, parchment, leather, and textile, which means that they require that rotation that we need to look into. So you might visit our collection and it looks the same, but basically every 6 months, all these paper works needs to be changed with something that's still relevant to that showcase. That's something else that will kind of imposed somehow limitation on how we can work during that with that showcases. For example, if a showcase is about art of 16th century in Iran, if we replace that artwork, we still should look into our collection and find another work that is still relevant to that showcase and talks about the theme of that showcase. So that requires a lot of research that we need to do to be able to identify the artwork that we can put on display if we take something out, or like if we need to change the theme of that showcase, but still relevant to the rest of the story that we are telling. So that's the part that we need to do research in advance before we come up with that final object list. But then we thought that, okay, so we are doing this rotation. How can we make it more visible to our visitors? That's where we came up with the idea of having themes in the gallery. So basically from like 2 years ago, whenever we do this rotation, we are not gonna simply just replace it with something else. We work around a new theme. themes that are like simple. For example, we worked around the theme of color blue. Just we looked at the color blue or architectural themes in the Islamic art. But then at the moment, if you visit our collection, we have the bloom rotation on display. But this is an exciting time because in 2 weeks' time, we're going to change to our next rotation, which is on the sound and music rotation. So if you visit us anytime, so please look for these symbols. So this symbols means that like any artifacts, manuscript or object that has this symbol on the label means that it has been selected to be part of this rotation. And then the label somehow talks about the theme that has been chosen. So again, this one was about flowers and plants in Islamic art. And this one that is going to be in, we're going to start rotating in 2 weeks, but it takes around a week and a half to complete the rotation. So by mid-November, we hope that we have the whole this new installation installed. It's about the sound and music. And so let's look a little bit closer at what exactly we mean when we are saying rotation. So this is a shot that I got from the 3D virtual tour that we are having, which I recommend if you're interested. It's nice to take it at your leisure, because I mean then here, if you go to the 3D virtual gallery, all these green dots that you're seeing, it doesn't pop up here because I mean it's a still screenshot, but then you can go and then the images. They're going to be a larger image plus the entire description of that artwork that is on display at the point that we got these images. So here is our, we call it our Shahnameh section. Shahnameh is epic poem, is a manuscript of epic poem written by the Persian poet Ferdowsi. And then it's the longest epic poem written by a single poet at any given time. So it has more than 50,000 rhyming couplets. So we do have 5 manuscripts like this of Shahnameh, and then we have several folios being single detached pages of a book. So, and that's something else that is in, we want to make sure that we consider when we visit, for example, our galleries, is that the paintings in Islam that falls under category of Islamic art, from Persian, Mughal, Indian, Turkish, up until I can say even 16th century, these paintings were not meant to be hung on a wall or seen on their own. They were at one point part of a manuscript, but they were meant to be read in a book, close to the reader and under probably candlelight and in relation to the text. So these folios that you're seeing historically at one point, maybe 18th century, 19th century, they were detached from the original body of the manuscript, but they meant to be part of a manuscript. So they are from different manuscripts of Shahnameh. But as I said, we also have the 5 of the manuscripts. So I chose this section of the gallery because, I mean, we can talk about both folios and manuscript, how we do the rotation. Like consider, like, for example, this one in the middle. So that's the folio. If you come and visit us today, for example, this week, this is the folio that is on display from, again, as I mentioned, from the Shahnameh or Book of Kings. We chose this one for this rotation because of the theme of flower and plants. It shows the poet himself. This folio is interesting because it has a portrait of the poet himself in the garden in a poetic competition with 3 other poets of his time. So it was a very tense poetic competition that was happening here. And this is the theme of this painting. But then if you come 2 weeks time in mid-November, like 3 weeks, hopefully by mid-November, when we have our new installation, this is going to be the folio on display. So we take this folio out, it goes to rest, and then we bring this other folio from the same manuscript on display. But if we don't have something that is really from the same manuscript, we try to choose something that's still like relevant to, as I said, to the theme of that showcase. So we chose this one because here, when you look, there are so many sound elements that is like about the city, about living in a like that environment. For example, we have, if you come and see the actual page, larger painting, so we can see that the ladies here are busy like spinning cotton thread. We have a baker in his baking bread here, a call to prayer that has been announced here. So these are the sounds that you can visualize by looking at this painting, and then also some of the text that goes with it. But in case of a manuscript that you saw in the middle, for example, that's the page that we are seeing right today, but we are moving it to the other page of the same manuscript. So we go several pages, so that page closes, no light for that. And then we open up to another page that this is the page that we chose. And this time we're going to discuss it a little bit further when we go down. But then you might visit, and then you might have seen this object has been there from the opening of the museum. It's not new to this rotation, but we make it part of this rotation, for example, because we look at it from a different perspective, from the theme of this rotation now. We change the label to somehow talks about the theme of this rotation, which is sound and music. For example, in this case, these olifants were used usually blown during the hunt or war, and then sometimes also like one end was closed and used as a wine drinking for drinking wine. But the main use of it is that actually that they were blown during the hunt. So there are certain other examples of similar olifants available, for example, in the museum in Germany, Islamic Museum in Germany, in Berlin. So in 2004, I believe, there were permission taken from the director of the museum and some musicians from the state opera. They went and they actually played the olifant, the historic olifants, and there are recordings available. So for example, for this rotation, we made that recording available for people to hear that what's the sound of these objects, because the majority of the artwork that are on display, at one point they were either created a sound or they were surrounded with sound. Even like imagine a metal candlestick, the sound of creating that or the sound of using it. So we are trying with this rotation to bring those sounds out, like of how a calligraphy, like writing a calligraphy would sound, or how this olifant would sound in real time when it was played, for example, it was used. And in order to get access to these sound elements, we are developing a look and listen trail. Once you're at the museum, it's going to also be available on our website for people who cannot visit us physically, but if you're there in our gallery, you can scan this on your cell phone using a QR code that we are going to have on available in the gallery, and then you can go through this and then find the stops that have sounds component. Like I showed you that this is the decal, this is the icon that we're going to have for anything that is related to our rotation. But then if you see the one that has these musical notes with it, that means that stop, you can go and stop and then play that music or like watch the video that is related to the object. And here I can, we are still finalizing it, but I thought like to show you how it might look like. That's the web page that you can get access to. And again, it asks you to follow, find this icon, and then you can go and then find the items that are going to be on display. And for example, let's go to the olifant. That's our olifant, for example. You can play the sound. I'm going to play briefly. I hope you can listen because it's through my computer, I hope. See if I can. That's a little bit lower here, but like, yeah, so that's the 3 to 5 minutes that you can listen to the sound of this olifant. And if you have any difficulty finding where it is, so we have this map it option that you can click, and then it shows where in the gallery you can find this object. So you can have it on your device, and then you can walk and enjoy our gallery finding these stops. Or for example, that's a candlestick. Let me also maybe, that's the sound of how the candlesticks, I mean, usually metal works, how they were made, for example. Sorry if it was loud. So, but that's the usual typical sound of a coppersmith or like a metalwork workshop where they are making these ones. And again, like there are like visual components. If that's the flamingo dance, that is related to the patterns, how you can see patterns, but like you can see it visually, but also you can see that or feel that in the music and dance, like folktale storytelling we have, or like the For example, we have this instrument on display, but we wanted to also for people to hear how this instrument might sound. I'm going to play it shortly again. Labyrinth. So yes, so feel free to make sure to download and use this trail. We are very excited for it, and again, so you can. The good thing is that like the videos and the sounds are embedded in the website that we're making, so that you can also, once you're at home, you can watch the entire video or rewatch the one that you like more. So I hope you enjoy that. And this, for example, this painting also, we have commissioned a new work based on this painting that we are having on display for the coming rotation, because this painting is from a Ragamala series that talks about a particular raga or musical mode that gives the sensation of as if you're swinging. So I was curious to know what this might sound. So we actually like commissioned the work from a musician who was expert in the raga, in the ragas, and then she performed at that particular Hindol raga for us, and then we have as part of that look and listen trail that you can enjoy. Or for example, this painting that we have that shows a musician playing tambura, but we were lucky that we had a tempura in our collection, the 19th century tempura that we put on display. So people not only see that in the 18th century painting, they can see the real 19th century example of the tempura, and then we can listen to how that instrument might sound. And if you have time, I highlighted some of our paintings, maybe for like, it's 10:30, maybe for like 6-7 minutes, we talk about some of the highlights of the paintings that are gonna be on display in this rotation. For example, this one is a scene from a manuscript called Khamse by a poet called Nizami. He was a 13th century poet, 12th, 13th century poet. And here in this particular scene, which is very exciting and interesting for me, is that it shows two lovers. This is Khosrow, is like a real historic Sasanian pre-Islamic king of Iran. And this is his lover, a beloved Shirin, who's an Armenian princess. So what is interesting here is that there is so much of a story going back and forth between them. They come together, they departed, and then at one point, Shirin, the lady, leave him and decided not to be with him anymore, but then she regrets. And she come back to the court of Khosrow, here hiding in this tent, and then she asked the two musicians of his court to come close. And here we see exactly, so these two people, Nakisa and Barbat, they are two real Sasanian musicians that actually laid the foundation of Persian music that we are having today. So that's the part that makes me excited that we have this representation in this miniature painting that we are having in our collection. So she calls them and she starts telling the story to Nakisa and asks him to sing it rather than she go and talk to Khosrow. So she used the power of music and poetry that asks Nakisa, and Nakisa sings it to the king, and the king starts like saying back, and then so instead of them talking together, they talk through the musicians, and then they resolve the issue and they get back together. Or like here in the other folio that we are having, that's an early example of a Shahnameh. The one that we had before was the 16th century. That's one of the earliest, actually we can say one of the earliest survived examples of Islamic painting, the paintings that we have under Islamic art. So from 13th to 14th century, you see it here, the paintings are smaller, but the text is larger. So the relationship between the text and painting here is more text, less of a painting, versus later is the other way around. But here we see that in this court, again, another king, this one is his name is Bahram. He's in disguise and visits the house of Mahyar, the jeweler. So here he's in disguise, nobody knows him. So Mahyar calls his daughter who's a harp player, who she's a harp player. So she comes and she just starts playing and singing in the for the respect of his father and also for the king, not knowing that the king is actually like sitting right there. So she sings beautifully. And then what I like about this, again, the relationship between the text and painting is that in the text it says the minute that she put her hand on the harp, starts playing, the scent of jasmine filled the space. So again, using other sensations like the smell and tie it to the painting and tie into the music, and then here we tie it to the painting itself. So use of all these different sensations to bring up that the power of music that is playing here by this Arezou, the lady who plays harp. That's the scene that you saw earlier in the manuscript that we were talking. So here again, so these two, it's a marriage scene that we see the prince is marrying the lady, so Pourvash and Frangi. So they again had a history behind how they finally get together, but we skip that story. But here what is important is that playing music for the newlyweds is a tradition that is still being happen in the culture, in the Persian culture. And here they're playing an instrument called kamanche. In the soundtrack, you can listen to the sound of the kamanche, how this bow instrument will sound, and a tambourine. And probably maybe this person also singing, because then again in the text says that the minute that they started playing, the whole universe turned to a garden setting from the beauty of their voice and the way that they were playing. And actually, since we are here, have the fountain. If you've seen our museum, we also have a fountain on display that we're going to talk about the sound of water and the importance of a sound of water, that the fountains were used both inside the residences and outside. So water played a part both indoor and outdoor settings. So, and what's the importance of water and the sound of it in the everyday life, that also has been highlighted in this rotation. Other than that, for example, the sound can be seen or again, based on the text or the painting that you're having, it can be in a even everyday life, or in a battle scene, like here, for example, the sound of the arrows that pass by the ear of the hero here, has such an impact on the hero based on the text that you're saying. Or we can see one of the horns playing here. It's not an olifant, but it's a metal horn. But the way that they were used in the during the war setting, for example. So in order to finalize our conversation here about the rotation, I just thought to include this slide to say the rotation that we talked about is a 6-month process. So usually it takes about 6 months for every new rotation. So the minute we install one, we need to start working on the next one, basically. So twice a year, we're going to have rotation. So the first phase is the research and development phase, when we finalize the object list and also work on the interpretive planning of the whole gallery. And then it's the most of the time goes to the design and content development, which is writing labels, editing, and translation. Our labels in the galleries are both English and French in the permanent gallery, not the exhibition upstairs. Exhibition is only English as far as I know. And rotation gives us a great chance to do conservation on our work, to make sure they're in stable and good condition. If they require any conservation, we make sure that we do the treatment. And then we do gallery design and graphic layout for the entire display. And then the last part is the fabrication and installation phase, which first of all is mount making. For example, if you want to put that musical instrument on display, so there should be a mount that holds it on display. Or even for our manuscripts, even though they have a mount, if we go too far in a manuscript, we need to create a new mount that gives a proper support. So when you change the ratio of the pages that sits on either side, you need to also give it a new mount. Matting, so all the new frames that they will receive, to make sure which window we want to open. If the mats are old, we need to renew the mats. It's a great opportunity for us to redo the photography to make sure we have high-res photography on display. And then that's the installation time, which is exciting. I mean, we take the old items out, and then we put the new, install the new items. And then this is a video that this is a 3 minutes video. I thought it's good to finish our conversation with this video, because it shows some of the behind the scenes for the rotation that we're having on display now, the bloom rotation. This is some of the moments of the behind the scene that we took of how, like, all that conservation and the labels and the matting was happening for this rotation. Oh, sorry, I should go back and then here. I'm gonna jump the, I'm just gonna make it large. I'm skipping the first part that I'm talking about, that rotation. We go to the, actually this part. Oops, sorry, that was loud. Okay, so yes, that's the end of my presentation. I look forward to hear your questions.